And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. Today is May 20th, 2022 on a Friday afternoon. In this week's episode, we'll be talking some interesting things that's been going on this past week or so. So, none more so than the first topic we'll be covering is, the Apple, the company, the tech company that's always finding ways to irritate consumers in terms of being anti-consumer, anti-repair, which is important if you want to retain your core customers. And being a monopolistic company is never always good for consumers, which I think many tends to forget. And obviously it's up to governments to wrangle in those companies and none of those lobbyists to be able to nudge them in the right direction so that they don't have too much control or power over the market. And interestingly enough, it's the EU who's pushing those agendas, not the American government here. And they've been pushing for using a different technology. I think Apple should have come up with it, using a Type C cable to transfer files or even charge your devices. And whatever Apple's excuses here is, if it's not a better product, you're just offering it so that you're stuck in their ecosystem. It looks kind of lame in the long run. And as we go over, eventually they have to evolve or change. Otherwise, a majority of their core customers will be fed up if they are not happy with their product. Especially, they don't want to irritate the Apple users, in particular the smartphone device users here, which is their key product line that they offer to the market. Anyway, other than that, next we'll be also talking about companies doing drastic things to deal with the pandemic that's you know that that's still ongoing, by normally to cut down on cost to stay afloat. Is obviously reducing cost, typically reducing number of employees or firing them or laying them, or whatever means, or early retirement and so forth. But that can be catastrophic if they're not careful. And as in the case, in the situation for the airline industry in particular, they have a big shortage of pilots. And firing them or removing them just to cut on cost is never ideal. We'll dig deep into that. So what's the solution there? Anyway, another topic that's very interesting is, we've been talking about this past weeks or even more, is regarding the hacking of our information, whether we know this or not, especially for big multinational companies. Hackers have found a way to circumvent or find vulnerabilities in their networks. And the question is, what are companies to do here? So obviously, for hackers, it only takes one small vulnerabilities that they can find so that they can use it to hijack the system here. And that's never good, because think about it, if your information pertains to, let's say, your customer base, right? Especially if in the banking industry, if you're let's say American Express, BPI, or whatever the banking institutions, and your data over your customers profile are hijacked, and then can access them. And obviously, you need to find ways to be able to avoid them. Now technically it's difficult to eliminate them, but you have to minimize them. So we'll go over that as well. And next we'll also be talking how a personal decision, regardless of your stature in life, whether you're a popular celebrity or even an athlete, laws are laws on countries that are very strict. And if you don't follow them to the T, you will be imprisoned. So will just simply because you're a known celebrity that you should be exempt with the rules. So we'll talk about that. And lastly, stay tuned for the last one when we talk about how a company was able to build a multi-billion industry by simply focusing on a missing market in terms of offering a $10 sports shoe or sneakers, as many called it, to grow it to where they are today. We'll stay tuned. Who am I talking about here? I was surprised to find out that they started from humble beginnings and are able to reach this heights. It's pretty remarkable if you think about it. Anyway, so to begin with our discussion this week, as mentioned, for all the benefit that Apple has provided for the general public, obviously providing us with better technology, the iPhones, the tablets, the desktops, and so forth. But not everything is always geared towards for the benefit of the users themselves. Yet, yes, the product is tremendous in terms of ergonomics, usability, but if it breaks down, it's not easily repaired. And even if you wanted it to be repaired in their Apple store, they would always try to sway you to buy a new product rather than get it fixed. What's that all about? But anyway, the point of our discussion today is more focused on one of their key apprehensions of moving away from using lightning cables. So if you notice, many of the companies, in Android, in the Android spectrums, in particular Samsung, Huawei, Oppo, Sony, and the lights, use a common data cable from the micro USB to now the more popular Type C cable here, which is kind of funny. Apple is also currently using that in their laptop. One of their features, using Thunderbolt 3 to be able to transfer data, which is kind of funny. Why don't they use that technology to also use it in their smartphones in the first place? But anyway, so let's take a closer look as to what's the rationale behind it. And it's as if Apple has, won't stop, delaying the inevitable, which obviously as consumers should push for innovation, a better offering, a better experience, for the price that they're asking consumers to pay. We expect a lot, right? It's not as if we don't want to buy their product. It's, is it a compelling case here? But anyway, so according to Android or Authority.com, so Apple's Lightning cable could die as early as next year, which is a bit kind of late in the picture if you think about it. They're now at Apple testing the USB-C for their iPhone, which is I think should have been done years ago. I mean, the Samsungs that I've been using this past few years has already Type-C capability, and Apple's, as mentioned, in their laptops and even in their desktops, have already Type-C capability, and they're not using data cable in their in their other devices, which is kind of bogus if you think about the rationale. Because does it have better technology? Does it provide better speed? Is what I'm asking. If it's not a better feature compared to Type-C, then they should have transitioned long time ago. And it took the governments, in particular the EU, to be able to push them to nudge them in that particular direction. And obviously Apple is not the only company in that same spectrum that they call that you would call controlling the market, being a monopolistic company like Apple does. But anyway, so further looking here, so as mentioned, they are testing the capability of Type-C in their latest smartphones here. And according to a known leaker, Ming Chi Kuo, you could see in iPhone Type-C. So 2023, that's not far from now, so a year from now. And also, what they could also do is make some iPhones be portless at the same time. Now, I think this is a terrible option here, because at the end of the day, having options is important, whether you want to use the traditional cable to transfer files or using Bluetooth or, wireless transition, but it's not as reliable as one would like. So if Apple could provide that better technology, then again, another innovation is necessary to be able to do that. but limiting the option from your customers, or let's say in the lower end of your smartphones, they'll do away with the cable and just offer, wireless technology, which is, I think, people should not accept that reality. I mean, having options in terms of features, if you can offer it as a given, remember the good old days where all smartphones used to have headphone capability. You could use Bluetooth if you prefer, but you also have the option of using a hardwired headphones if you prefer, because obviously one of the downsides of having wireless headphones is that if it runs out of battery, you technically cannot use it. But with a traditional, earbuds that you could just plug in, doesn't need battery, right? And I'm saying that the company knows better, but the consumer should have the opportunity to decide for themselves, is what I'm saying here. Anyway, continuing. So the company is likely making the change to comply with the upcoming EU legislation that will require all manufacturers to adopt Type C. So again, if it weren't for pressure from the governments, Apple would not budge or do anything about it. And that's again another concern of, if company has too much control in the marketplace, they tend to be complacent and not do anything, right? Look at other companies that does the same thing. Innovations is at a standstill. And another good example where Apple innovated, think about when they offered the Apple M1 chips, right? This put Intel on notice regarding their performance, which is very lagging behind. And if they didn't, it emboldened Apple to provide a better, CPU chip, which is what M1 or now M2 that they're going to offer, which is superior to, optimized for Apple ecosystem here compared to Intel's, right? A big loss for Intel, but a big, kudos for Apple here. And obviously, who benefits here at the end of the day? The Apple users, right? And that's all what we want here. I mean, obviously, being criticizing them on the merits of what they should do better, since they're a billion-dollar, trillion-dollar company here. It's obviously we expect a lot from them as well. Anyway, it mentions here that at this point, most major Apple products come with at least one USB-C port, right? So you can look at the iPods, MacBooks, and PC. So how come in the smartphones devices is not fully integrated here? Which is, it's not by accident, it's by intention. So you have to buy their proprietary Lightning cable, which is, is it a better cable is what I'm asking. If it were better, then they should have stuck with it. But obviously that's not the case in terms of transfer speed, being able to connect your device to a monitor, whether it's 4K and so forth, has tremendous benefit using a Type-C cable here. Let alone if it's a Thunderbolt 3 uh, 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 port as well. So as mentioned here is the iPhone's USB Type C has been a long time coming, and obviously Apple is making excuses or rational that they're stating that the cable, if it's become obsolete, would cause a lot of e-waste there. Well, whose fault was that? Right? When the technology was shifting to using other types from micro USB to Type C, making it easier, because the simple fact is a Type C connector is a, how you call it, idiot proof, so to speak. So no matter which sides you plug it in, it's very easy to use. Even a blind person can do it, right? Or in darkness, when you're trying to plug it in, let's say your phone is already running low, so you need to charge it again or charge it quickly, and you can see the cable in the dark, and then you're struggling to plug it in, because if it's on the right side, if it's a micro USB, but in a Type C, it's very convenient. And the fact that it can transfer files quicker than compared to traditional ones, and you can use bigger monitors for to your heart's content here is, it's a big plus. And Apple hasn't come up with a test case that their Lightning cable is so much better than their Type C. The fact that their other devices is utilizing that is already a testament to that one. If that were the case, they should have used Lightning cable for all of their products, right? Anyway, so question here is, should have should it have uh, taken them that long to decide, not come from their own volition of realizing that the innovation of what Type C can offer to many consumers worldwide is a big tremendous benefit, especially if you're trying to I think the power delivery capability also is another plus. I don't know if the Lightning cable has that capability as well here. So we'll stay tuned here if Apple will follow through with the transition by next year. Anyway, continuing with our discussion. So next is we'll be talking about, again, in a way, the pandemic that's been ravaging many businesses, to the point of bankruptcy. Some have stayed afloat by doing drastic measures, as mentioned earlier. And one of the drastic measures is to cut costs, obviously, and cutting costs to the point of that can be detrimental to your company. And in the case of the airline industry, cutting costs by laying off employees, key employees at that, has long term consequences. And as the case pointed out in this article, is has already surfaced, and they're now scrambling as to what to do about it. So in this article, CNBC.com, it mentions that a severe pilot shortage in the United States leaves airlines scrambling for solutions. Well, you've got no one else to blame but yourselves, because you're the ones who fired them, and now you needing them. Obviously, the pandemic is very severe, and catastrophic, you would consider. And companies just became reactionary, didn't think through those things, that long term wise, what could be the effect of laying off such a significant workforce, in particular the pilots themselves, because you need pilots. Airplanes don't fly by themselves, and people will not ride it if there's no if there's no pilot inside it. And it just got me thinking, at the time that they were thinking of reducing the payroll, why didn't they reduce the payroll of those executives in the first place, right? The executives were replaceable, the pilots are not, if you think about it. Oh, now look at the solutions that they're trying to do to be able to meet the growing demands here. Anyway, so as mentioned, the pandemic was the cause of the shortage, because of finding ways to cut down costs. Training has been removed. Hiring has stopped, obviously, and then pushing for senior pilots to retire early. So that caused a downshift in their manpower here. So now, question is, when business has started to pick up again, oh, they need pilots now. They have plenty of airplanes that they can you know transfer, move people from one place to another. But the sad fact is, there's no pilots, there's no driver. So where do you get those drivers? It's not as if you could just get someone off the streets to become pilots all of a sudden. And the scary part is, if you get inexperienced pilot, can be disastrous also, which again goes back to the early parts of when those airlines decided to lay off those key employees, in particular those pilots as mentioned. Anyway, but the benefit of this situation, the process to become an airline qualified in the U.S. is lengthy and expensive. Typically would make it barrier to entry very high. But because of this opportunity, if you're thinking of becoming an airline pilot, now's the best time to apply for a job, because there's a lot of positions open, not enough supply to meet the demands here. Anyway, so according to the United States, is facing its worst pilot shortage in recent memory, and obviously the pandemic was the main cause of this one. And obviously they were trying to find for practical solutions here. And letting go of employees is a viable solution, but obviously the dilemma that they were in a bind, obviously the pandemic is not going to last forever. So they should have known going in that they should have found a way to be able to stabilize, hold majority of their best employees, in particular the pilots, so that once it stabilizes, they don't have to hire new one, because obviously at the end of the day, if you let go of those competent employees, some would already move on, go to another company, and then you have to hire new ones, train new ones, which is even more costly. Since you've already invested a lot of money on those capable pilots in the first place, then all of a sudden, once you let go, you bring in a new ones. Yes, sure, you have new fresh blood coming in, but obviously in this particular profession, uh, mastery of your profession is critical here. Obviously, gaining substantial experience, flight time, so you can be confident in flying those you know big bricks of the airplane that we call them. And and if it's not an experience, then obviously the high risk of making a mistake is even more pronounced. And obviously, if you make a mistake up in the sky, it can bring down the whole plane and alongside with your passengers, which is not a good thing to hear in terms of PR nightmare here. Anyway, so the proposed reduced flight hour requirements before joining the US care. So again, one of their, you know, solutions, which is, yes, it makes it easier for many to become pilots, and also rethinking their training programs to lower the barrier to entry. Again, it's a double-edged sword, making it easier, but you get the best pilots in the world to fly your airplanes here. So that can be an issue here. And also, they're thinking of dropping the 4-year degree from its pilots hiring requirements. So again, lessening the requirements. Does it mean you'll get better qualified pilots or lesser qualified? Can be a tricky situation here. Some are considering recruiting some pilots from as far as Australia. So meaning, if there's not enough supply in the United States, they'll go abroad here. And obviously, if you live abroad and if you're a capable pilot, then there's always a big opportunity now to go to the United States and become a certified pilot here. And according to United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby, he mentions that the pilot shortage in the industry is real, and most airlines are simply not going to be able to realize their capacity plans because there simply aren't enough pilots, at least not for the next 5 plus years. The fact that the next 5 years is going to be problematic for them, and again, it goes back to their decision of laying off those. Why not reduce the salaries of those executives who made the so-called tough decisions, because you're still earning your 6, 7, 8, or 9 figure paycheck, and yet don't even have the necessary resources to be able to man your airplanes here. And now it's biting them in their rear in terms of their poor decision making here. And he goes on to mention that regional airlines, United Works, we currently have about 150 airplanes grounded because of the pilot shortage. And due to that fact of limited shortage and the fact that you have more planes in standby or parked, which just goes to show you the opportunity cost that it is mounting. And obviously, to those who are able to address it quickly will tend to benefit from that situation here. And obviously, the root cause of the crisis, as mentioned, is the pandemic. But it's not if it's not the pandemic, it's something else that decision makers or executives in this case, whether it's in United Airlines or Delta and whatever the carrier it is, that they should we need really decide on those decisions that may save them in the short run, but in the long run can have a significant impact on their business. And it just goes to show. And question is, will there be any repercussion to those decision makers who made those choice a few months or several months or a few years back? And the question here is, will it be addressed anytime soon here? So it was mentioned here, according to Phoenix-based Mesa Air Group, which flies for American United, they lost nearly $43 million in the last quarter alone as flight cuts mounted. And obviously, people are starting to go back out traveling again, whether for work or for leisure. Demand for aviation will always be at an all-time high compared to other forms of transportation here. And opportunity cost is a very serious issue here, and whether you're small or big airlines, you're going to be affected here significantly here. Now, according to the article, the growth curtailed pilots and other worker shortages have forced airlines to rethink their growth plans. Well, obviously, how can you grow without any pilots here, or capable pilots in this case here? And until they solve it and find temporary solution, so to speak. And what's interesting here is the fact that they need at least 5,000 pilots by the end of 2030 here. So meaning, there's a significant gaping hole in the workforce, in particular in the pilot industry. So if you're listening in here, maybe that's something you would consider here. The demand for pilots is, especially if you like, traveling, but obviously the tension of being responsible for all the passengers that you're flying the airplane for is another matter here. But anyway, we'll see what happens with this one. I'll keep you updated with the goings on here. Anyway, next will be, we've been discussing earlier regarding, how companies are left vulnerable, and is it by intention or by carelessness? And here again, another article has surfaced regarding how hackers are able to penetrate, multi-billion or Fortune 500 companies' databases by means of a vulnerable network gear. Question here is, was this left by accident or intentional, or incompetence was a major factor here? And obviously, being hacked is no joke. Can have severe repercussions for businesses. If you're locked out in your in your own company, you can access your information, your clientele, your own personal files, and you have to pay a substantial amount to be able to recover them. Not that they would admit it, is very concerning here. So according to techspot.com, hackers are exploiting a popular networking gear used in most Fortune 500 companies, as mentioned. And according to the researchers, they have recorded more than 16,000 instances of the exploit in the wild. So that's a lot of instances here. And obviously, with better technologies here, better connectivity is always tremendous. Real-time information getting back and forth, but also gives chances for nefarious people or activities to be able to to penetrate the systems as well, which is not a good deal here. That's why having protections, being prepared, like putting actual firewalls in your systems to be able to protect yourselves is always important. So let's find out what makes them, what are they able to exploit the network here. So according to the article, hackers are using an empty password exploit to gain root control over their networks. So thousands of devices have already been hit. If you are an admin using F5's big IP devices, so you need to update them as soon as possible. So again, updating your system is always important, and you also need someone taking a look at it on a 24/7 basis. That's why, if your company is so reliant on data, you need someone who has a full-time job making sure that your data is also secure. Think of it like a bank. Right? A bank always has multiple redundancies to protect, depositors' money. Here, you don't want, anyone just simply accessing, other people's money, robbing the bank, and so forth. It should have that same mentality here. Now, obviously, physical money is totally different from virtual data that we're talking about, whether it's in a computer or in a data center and whatnot. There's a physical aspect, but the mindset should be the same also, that you value the data that you have acquired, because when it's lost, you have nowhere to go. Imagine you've lost the list of your customer base, your clientels, your suppliers, and on and on. And you'll just start from scratch again, which is a very daunting task to begin with. Now, it was mentioned here that the vulnerability in sensitive networking used by most of the top Fortune 50 companies, the flaw mentioned here is the CVE 2022-1388, has a severity of 9.8 out of 10. That's a pretty high ranking here because hackers are already exploiting the weakness, as mentioned, which allows them to execute a root command without even entering a password. So meaning, you don't even put a layer of passwords typical in a computer, right? That's why those tech companies which we talked about last week, that they are promoting a passwordless future, which is ideally nice. But again, hackers will it be easier for them to penetrate your system? If it does, then I'm not for passwordless future here. And the fact that people can still forget to input password, and obviously a word of tip, that never input simple algorithmic passwords like 1 2 3 4 5, or writing your passwords is a terrible idea. So you want to use a mix match of alphanumeric combination, and make sure it's not easily remembered, that it's only unique to your identity, that if you were to consider it, not many can, or not practically anyone should know, be able to do that. And until our technology has reached to the point that it's very secure, that's very highly unlikely to be hacked, if we're not going to use any more passwords, then I'm all for it as well. Anyway, so what happens here, because of those vulnerabilities, it gives them complete control of the network, which is not something you want to hear from a company standpoint here, meaning all of your information data will be accessed to their heart's content. So the vulnerability mentioned here is the F5's big IP line of network gear. So company use this equipment for loading, balancing, firewalls, and data encryption. It is particularly concerning since big IP is often used on network edges to manage traffic. So traffic flow in and out, can see data, encrypted data from HTTPS, protected sites as mentioned. So security firm Randori notes that research have recorded over 16,000, which is pretty significant. So that's not a glitch in the system or a minor infraction here, are exploiting the said vulnerabilities here. So apparently the device have an authentication code. Now it mentions YWRTAW46, right? Now some thought that it was a hard-coded password, but according to an analyst, Will Dorman, the authentication code is just the word admin, that is based on 64, meaning those tech people who are very irresponsible don't even know. Now, obviously, I'm not a tech person, so I'm not familiar with that. But if you're in that industry, you should know better that it's not a password just because it looks alphanumeric here with the way it looks. You don't understand here, but it's just another link to another language in another system here. So, according to many security professionals, we're stunned that there's a keep, not just a small hole, but a very big hole that, obviously, in games, you capitalize on those glitches, loopholes to benefit you. Maybe you can do some cheat codes, but in the real world, when you do this, there has significant impact to your business, and can cost you millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars, if this persists in the future here. And according to Jake Williams in his tweet, I'm not entirely unconvinced that this code wasn't planted by a developer performing corporate espionage for an incident response firm, as some sort of revenue guarantee scheme here. If so, brilliant. If not, WTAF. Dot. And again, it just goes to show you that there's no perfect system here, and the sad fact is, for hackers, it only takes them one vulnerability to be able to penetrate your system. But for the company, obviously, the bigger you are, the more difficult it is to protect your infrastructure, in particular your data centers, or your data in general. That's why it's important to train your employees. You have capable people inside and outside to protect your interests, whether it's governments or private firms in this case. Otherwise, this problem will only continue, and it will continue to grow. And if warfare was the main problem in the past 20th century or so, or 19th century, the future will involve more on attacking your data rather than going into war, with rifles and guns and so forth. So we'll see, if there's anything new that would arise in the very near future here. Anyway, continuing. So going now into sports. So not more so the playoffs, but the NBA playoffs. Regarding how a personal decision, regardless of your stature, if you don't follow the laws of that particular government, there should be no exemptions here, and that's the sad case here with regards to a WNBA star Brittany Griner's extended stay in Russia in particular, because of sort of smuggling illegal drugs. So we'll focus on that one. So according to CNBC.com, the WNBA star pre-trial detention in Russia is extended by a month, according to the lawyer. Now, when I saw this, what preceded this? What caused her detention here? So what was the problem here in the first place? So Griner, a star center for the Phoenix Mercury, was arrested in February on drug charges after a search of her luggage at the Sheremetyevo airport near Moscow turned up vape cartridge for smoking. So vape cartridges containing oil derived from cannabis. So meaning obviously cannabis in some areas or parts of the world, like in Russia, is considered illegal here. That's why you have to be responsible on your decisions. So would that excuse you from not knowing that it's illegal in other countries, but it's legal in your countries? Well, you pay the price, and the consequence here, I think, as mentioned, she could be locked up for 10 years if that's the case. And obviously, the United States, in particular, uh, the NBA, the United States Basketball Association is also taking a look at this one as well. And the offense could carry a maximum of sentence of 10 years. And if she's found guilty, then obviously the U.S. government can't do anything to do about it, because at the end of the day, it was her choice to enter the country, bringing illegal stuff, which regardless if she knew or didn't know, you're supposed to be responsible. Everything that you bring, you should be aware of what is allowed and not allowed to be brought in another country. Now, according to the State Department, determined she was being wrongfully detained by the Russian government. Classifications will allow U.S. government to more aggressively secure her release. So again, obviously on the government side, they're trying to find ways to be able to bring back Miss Griner back to the United States. But at the end of the day, with the war that's ongoing, and obviously both countries, the U.S. and Russia, are not on, you would say, on friendly terms right now. So that could be a very dicey situation, especially given her case that illegal drugs is no matter how you look at it, is not legal, and you shouldn't have uh, brought it in the first place, or even put yourself in harm's place in that particular situation. So we'll wait and see if she's able to do that, or maybe she'll be the exception rather than the rule in this scenario here. Anyway, for our last story here, so as I mentioned, as I promised earlier, an interesting thing here is a business could turn to $1 billion industry, by simply focusing on what's missing in the market here, whether it's in social media or selling a product or a service here, as mentioned. And the case in point in this case is by selling a $10 shoe, or a sneaker at that, has turned this business into $1 billion industry for this businessman here. Now, who am I talking about? So let's take a closer look here. So according to Forbes.com, selling sports shoes under $10 turned this shoemaker into India's newest billionaire here, with a capital B, not just an M here. So meaning that's pretty remarkable if you think about it. So how are they able to find out? Well, obviously finding a gap in the market, what's not being offered, and if you offer it, people would buy it. And so it doesn't necessarily have to sell a very expensive item to generate significant revenue. Does it mean you have to sell a lot of products if it's sold affordably? Yeah, but if significantly a majority of your population buys your product locally and abroad, then it's a pretty good deal as well. So let's take a closer look here. So whom are we talking about? Which entrepreneur are we talking about? So as you can see here in the photo, we have Hari Krishan Agarwal, which launched the brand Campus Sports Shoes way back in 2015. So that's more than a decade already. So the IP of Campus Activewear, which sells more shoes than the likes of Nike and Adidas in India, propels its founder into billionaires club. So meaning finding that right opportunity to capitalize is able to beat the likes of Nike. And obviously Nike's target market and Adidas is slightly different than what Campus is offering here in terms of affordability versus premium products here. So obviously in a nation like in India, a vast majority of their population is obviously not necessarily well off. So meaning buying expensive shoes may not be their cup of tea or their priority, but obviously offering affordable, reliable alternatives is always a good thing to start with here. So let's look on further. So so we have Mr. Hari Krishan Agarwal, 66, founder of Delhi-based Campus Activewear. Entered the Three Kama Club. I like that, the Three Kama Club. After the stellar IPO of his sports shoes company. So shares of the Campus Active were listed at a handsome 20% premium to the IPO price. So Agarwal 70% stake is now worth around $1 billion. So it's pretty significant. Anyway, so the 9 billion Indian footwear industry has spawned 3 billionaires in recent years. So you have brothers Mukund Lal Dua and Ramesh Kumar Dua, who runs the $350 million Relaxo footwear, which sells everything from casual sandals to formal shoes. Another is Rafiq Malik, who took his 100 million revenue, a Mumbai-based metro brand, public only last December. Anyway, so Agarwal's entrepreneurship began obviously way back in the 1980s. Anyway, what's interesting here is obviously the key here is, according to the Chief Financial Officer Raman Chawla, he capitalized on the huge vacuum in the Indian sports shoe market. And again, it's all about opportunities. And if you're able to capitalize on those opportunities, you can make a killing out of this, literally and figuratively, in the $10 to $40 range. So think about it. If it's $10 here in the Philippines, that's roughly around 500 pesos. So that's pretty cheap. One more thing, that's made in China and that's of low quality here. But if you can offer high value at a low affordable price, obviously people would, gladly buy it and buy it in chunks if you think about it. And could go as high as $40. So roughly around 2,000 pesos, which is still, half the price of what Nike and Adidas offers in our market, typically around 4 or 5,000 bucks, maybe as high as 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 if it's a signature shoe from a sports athlete here. Anyway, according to consulting firm Technopath, the fiscal 2021, the campus was India's largest player in the branded sports and athleisure fusion of athletic and leisure segment, both in the value of number of shoes. It has 70% market share by value and nearly 25% by volume. So meaning it has catapulted the company into the status of being able to capitalize on what the market needs and demands. So they have already sold 13 million pairs in 2021 alone, reaching to almost 100 million in revenue. This was a slight dip of 95 million compared to the previous year. Now, obviously, given that we had, the pandemic, we're just off 2 years from now. So a year before, could understand. But being able to reach the same consistency, meaning people are still buying despite, the pandemic here. And what's interesting, sales are marching upwards. Campus recorded a revenue of over 100 million for the 9 months ended in 2021 here. So pretty remarkable if you think about that. Opportunities are aplenty if we're just aware or listening or looking what's on the horizon here. And what's interesting here, that sports shoes is one of the fastest growing segments in the footwear sector here. And I think obviously comfortability is important, but being able to utilize it in different facets, whether it's walking, running, maybe playing sports, could be a tremendous boon or benefit for the business or industry in this case here. So obviously compared to other nations, it helps that your nation is pretty, is only lagging behind in terms of population to China. That's why, if a substantial portion of your population buys your product, you're going to do well, right? Compared to let's say to other Asian nations. Let's say if you're in Thailand, maybe, or in Cambodia, or even in Singapore, which has a smaller population. So obviously, it takes a lot more creativity to be able to succeed in the market here. But nonetheless, it's a pretty remarkable, achievement, so to speak. What's interesting here, that the company here is considered a family-owned business. In a sense, it's a family affair, so to speak. So you have Mr. Agarwal, as mentioned, who was the CEO at the time, and now his son, Nikhil Agarwal, who was an industrial engineer, has now succeeded him to become the CEO. And then you have Nikhil's wife, Perna, is the chief marketing officer. And then the founder's wife, Vinod Agarwal, who used to lead supply chain initiatives and network of fabricators for campus sports shoes, was on board until 2021. So here's the photo of the patriarch and the current CEO of campus here. So it's very interesting, no? So, opportunities are always aplenty. You just have to be patient and opportunistic on, what's on the horizon here. Like in the social media platform, in the case of Facebook, you're on notice. What do you call this? TikTok is on your heels and trying to capture your market. And question is, what are you doing to stave off competition? Are you innovating? Offering us the augmented reality is not doing you any good, right? So regardless if it's in the social media platform, the tech industry, or even, manufacturing of basic products, right? It's all about what the customer wants and needs. And if you offer it at a substantial price or premium price, but with significant value, people will buy it in droves at the end of the day. Anyway, I think that concludes another edition of our discussion for this week. Anyway, if you have any question, feel free to leave your comments down below and I'll try to get back to you. Also, I'll post the link in the description below for the full article if you're interested in reading the whole shebang here. As always, thanks for your support. If you enjoy these types of content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button to help grow this channel. And maybe you can share the good word so that more people can know that, we talk about business in general here and have a conversation, so to speak here. As always, I'll see you again next week. Same time, same channel. Take care.